Welcome to App Stories, a weekly exploration of the world of apps. Today's show is brought to you by Linode. I'm John Voorhees, and with me as always is Federico Vidici. Hey, Federico.
Hello, John. How are you?
I'm doing okay. Boy, you know what? It's funny since we don't have an in-person WWDC this year. It's funny to think that it's actually practically upon us. I mean, usually this time of year, we're in the beginning of May. I'm thinking about what am I going to take with me? What am I going to pack? I think about the people I'm going to see who are traveling to San Jose at the same time, and all of those kind of travel plan type things. And it's just not part of the reality this year, unfortunately. But the reality is, it's sometime probably within the next 4 to 8 weeks, we will have a WWDC online.
Yeah, it needs to happen at some point. So right now I'm a little skeptical that it'll be the early June, given everything happening, and plus because Apple doesn't have to. They're not holding the conference in a physical location.
Right.
It's an online event, so they may be free to postpone maybe by a week or two compared to the usual schedule. Maybe it can start in mid-June. Maybe it can be in late June. It doesn't feel like they should be necessarily constrained by any particular timeline. If anything, the only timeline that Apple needs to consider, I guess, is the public release of a new version of iOS that typically needs to coincide with the launch of new iPhones. But also, this year, we're hearing that maybe it's possible that at least some of the new iPhones of the iPhone 12 line will probably come out later than usual. So maybe not September, maybe late October, as it happened with the first iPhone 10, with the iPhone 10. I believe it came out in November.
I think that's correct. Sometime in the first couple of weeks in November, I believe.
Yeah. So maybe if all the new iPhones are coming out in November, maybe WWDC could even be in late June, because a new version of iOS doesn't have to be ready in early September, but who knows?
But the reality is we don't know. We still don't know when WWDC is going to be, which means it could be anytime during June. And I know you've been thinking and getting ready for, the usual, I guess it's the annual process of writing the iOS review, which happens over the summer. And you're always kind of ready with your tools and what your strategy is going to be going into WWDC. And have you been doing the same thing this year, even though it's a little different format?
I'm thinking about it, which is why I wanted to do this episode all about my the writing process and the editing and the research, everything that surrounds writing these annual iOS reviews. I've been thinking about it, and I've been thinking about some of the changes that maybe could occur this year. If anything, too, because it's a process, right? I've been doing this on an annual schedule for the past few years. At this point, I believe I started officially with iOS 9. But even before that, I was still writing like separate stories each summer about iOS, but it was with iOS 9 that I committed to a full annual review. And now we're coming on to version 14, so this would be my fifth review, I guess, like official annual review.
Sure.
And every year it's a process, and every year I try to keep up with the what the App Store offers in terms of text editors and note-taking apps and research apps that work well with my habits, with my my quirks, the way that I like things, the way that I like to work. And every year I try to fine-tune this process. I try to refine this workflow and ensure that I can think as little as possible about the management of the review, because it becomes a sort of a procrastination that is not really that productive when you think about it, and focus entirely on taking notes and writing as much as possible during the day and editing later in the summer to get ready for September. Now, the things that we're going to discuss today are based on the latest version of this setup, that a collection of tools and apps and shortcuts that I used to prepare my iOS and iPadOS 13 review last year in 2019. And at a high level, if you are curious about the visual aspect of all this, and if you want to download some of the shortcuts that I will mention and just have more details and screenshots and a deeper explanation of the things we're going to cover. I wrote about all of this in issue 192 of Mac Stories Weekly, which is the newsletter that we send to Club Mac Stories members every week. So in issue 192 from September 2019, you will find all the details and deeper explanations, especially for screenshots and stuff, which are obviously more difficult to convey on a podcast.
Sure.
That being said, John, I thought we could just talk about the three big aspects: so research, writing, and editing. What do you think?
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. And I'm looking at your notes, and I actually want to back you up just one little step before we jump into what you have here for research and talk a little bit about the keynote and the immediate aftermath of the keynote. Because I know that one of the things I've seen you do when we're together is every so often during the day, you'll just kind of sit down and go through your timeline on Twitter and collect a bunch of tweets where people have found interesting tidbits in the APIs or the betas or whatever it happens to be. Is that something that you're going to be doing this year, do you think?
Yeah, the tweets are always useful, right? Because people have time to dig around, on the Apple website, on the developer documentation, and they find these little hidden gems in terms of new features and new APIs that maybe Apple didn't mention at the keynote or didn't mention at the State of the Union. So I think it's always helpful, especially because my reviews tend to focus on these smaller details, right? The smaller implementation aspects of a new version of iOS and iPadOS. It is useful for me to save these tweets and comments from people that I find on Twitter. It can be, obviously, on keynote day, it's a little unmanageable, especially during the keynote, to keep up with the tweets. But I think it's, a couple of hours later, it's when it's most useful. And I always archive these tweets in Apple Notes, especially now that tweets should be previewed with at least the first line of text of the actual tweet in Apple Notes. But in general, I do use Apple Notes for all kinds of notes pertaining to the review. So I always create like a interesting tweets note in the iOS review folder in Apple Notes, and that's where I save all kinds of tweets. And later I go in there and I basically copy and paste them in the individual notes that I create for individual features or apps of a new version of iOS.
Okay, that's interesting. The reason I asked that, because I know you have Apple Notes in your outline here. The reason I asked was I was kind of wondering whether you might consider using Tweet Notes, which I know is still in beta, but might be. I could see that being a good tool to be like your first cut of a tweet, and then you could send something from there into a specific note instead of having kind of one note that collects all the tweets. Does that make sense to you at all?
Possibly, yes. Of course, Tweet Notes hasn't come out yet. It's still a test flight beta. It's an open beta. I think you can sign up via the app's Twitter profile. They have a link. But my first thought about this is that maybe it would make more sense for me to save them in Apple Notes, because then it becomes easier to just cut a link from one note and paste it into another, especially because I can use Notes multi-window, and I can keep my my Scratchpad note on the left side of the screen and another window of Apple Notes on the right side of the screen, and I can just cut a link and move it in another note in another window. It just feels easier given my workflow. But yes, I do save. I do like to save all kinds of tweets in the same note, and later I can go in there and organize them.
All right, that makes a lot of sense. All right, so what else are you using Apple Notes for besides collecting tweets kind of early in the process?
So Apple Notes is where I save all of my notes and thoughts initially. I have a folder that I sort of recreate every year called iOS Review, and in the iOS Review folder, I create individual notes for at first apps, not chapters, because I take notes on an app by app basis. So I would have a Safari note and a mail note, and then I would have maybe a design note, if that makes sense. And I save notes from the keynote, from the State of the Union, and it's also what I use while watching videos for sessions of WWDC, right? So in the past, what I would do is I would put Apple Notes in split view, and Safari on the other side of the screen and watch videos, WWDC session videos, from the Apple developer website. I use the website, not the WWDC app, which is now called Apple Developer app. I use the WWDC website because via the website, I could use a shortcut that you will find linked in the show notes for this episode called Video Speed App, which is a JavaScript shortcut that I could run in Safari, and it used the native WebKit API to change the video playback speed of a native video player in Safari. That's because I like to watch WWDC session videos at 1.5x speed, which I find is not as sort of odd sounding as 2x, but it's still faster than 1x, and it lets me save just a little bit of time. Also, because of the technical nature of sessions, most presenters, they don't talk very fast because they need the audience to follow and take notes.
Right.
So 1.5 is ideal for watching at home and being able to pause and take a note and resume, and you're still going to save a bit of time, which is
right
for me in the summer.
When I listen to things at 1.5x, if I listen to a podcast at 1.5x, it's usually too fast. But I agree with you that those videos do tend to move very, very slowly, so it's a lot easier. The Apple Developer app did just get updated with his speed changes.
I was about to mention that. So until last year, I would use Safari. Now, because the Apple Developer app has native video speed controls, I think I will just use the Apple Developer app. So no more Safari. I'll just use Notes and the Apple Developer app in split view and take my notes. And when I take notes, I try to give them a bit of structure, of course, but I don't obsess over it because the structuring process will happen later. So when I'm done taking notes, right, I've watched all the sessions that I'm interested in, and I have a broad idea of the chapters and like what I want to cover in the review, right? I have a sense of, okay, these are the stories that maybe I can let someone else cover in the summer, which we're going to do more this year, by the way. We're going to have some more stories compared to last year during the summer about the new versions of iOS and iPadOS. But still, at this stage, so we're talking late June usually when I've come back from WWDC. So again, no idea what's going to happen this year, but usually in late June, I have this collection of notes, and they have somewhat of a structure, but not really. So what I do is I spend usually a couple of days. Last year was actually just a single day, but I worked like 12 hours that day. So, a couple of days, let's say, to migrate those notes from Apple Notes to MindNode. And this process, it may seem like I'm doing the work twice, but it's actually very helpful to me because it allows me to take all these thoughts and notes and comments, so all kinds of content that I've saved in Apple Notes, and filter it down to the actual structure of the review. So it's in this process, in moving, literally like cutting and pasting from Apple Notes to MindNode, that I can also realize, okay, this is the structure that I want. So for example, last year, I remember, okay, I want the design chapter to be very early on in the review. And I want to split it in these sections like dark mode and context menus. And then I want to write about rich links, for example. And thanks to this process of taking stock of all the notes that I've saved and comparing them side by side between Notes and MindNode, it really helps me get rid of the duplicate stuff, understand which stuff is important and what isn't, and very quickly come up with a good structure in terms of what's the flow of the review gonna be. Do I want to put this longer chapter next to this other longer chapter, or do I want to have like a shorter one in the middle to like serve as a break between them? And all this happens in this process.
Yeah, it's interesting to me because I know from, like last year when you and I were together in San Jose, it was pretty clear that you already had an idea even before you left California how this thing was going to be structured. I mean, it was not down to the level of detail that you end up with in your MindNode mind map, but my sense was you had a pretty good idea because even before we left, we had talked about some of the stories that we were going to do over the summer. They were going to split off of the review because we were already thinking about who was going to write those and that sort of thing. And that list evolved a little bit over the summer, but I think the core of it was already there before we even left the conference.
Yeah, and this I think this just comes with experience, right? With doing this year after year, summer after summer, and trying at least to get better at managing my stress and being more realistic in terms of my capabilities, you know? And every year I overshoot in some direction, right? Whether it's, I think I can do all these chapters, or I think I can be, within this word count. So every year I learn something new about myself and about my limits and about my, just how I deal with these kinds of projects. But yeah, I've definitely gotten better at having a sense of what the review is going to look like very early on. Why do I use MindNode? Some people may ask. I used to use iThoughts years ago. I switched to MindNode last year for a couple of reasons. First, it's got excellent support for external displays, and it's got this feature that if you're using the iPad Pro with an external display, as I do with my ultrafine 4K, you can choose to lock the external display to a specific region of your mind map. And you can, on the other displays, or the iPad Pro, you can scroll the mind map however you want. So that allows me to, for example, lock the external display to a specific chapter, and then with the iPad Pro, view another section of the map. So this is useful when comparing, for example, what am I actually writing about in this section, and what's my plan for this other section. It's a way to effectively have a bigger window. Or you can do the opposite, right? You could have the full mind map on the external display, and then on the iPad Pro nail down on a specific section. So that's also useful to me.
Yeah, that is really cool to me. I mean, I think that's a really great feature because that allows you to be both planning the big picture and the focused picture at the same time.
Yeah, that's exactly the reason why I like it so much. Obviously, MindNode is very polished. Like the UI, the design, the fact that it uses the document browser, it all looks fantastic. It's got excellent integration with the external keyboard, now more than ever with the Magic Keyboard, having excellent support for keyboard shortcuts and all these time-saving commands. Super useful, especially when you have these huge sprawling maps as the mind maps for my iOS reviews. Being able to quickly expand, for example, all nodes in the map or expanding just a single section, super useful. And what I also use, and this may be, it's a silly thing, but visually I think it helps me a lot. You can attach stickers to nodes in the mind map. Stickers are like these custom icons that MindNode has, and they allow you to visually highlight any node in the app. So you can put like a light bulb, or like a warning sign, or like a heart, or a computer. You have all kinds of these custom stickers inside the app. And now I believe in the latest version of MindNode, you can even place stickers anywhere on the map. So I use this as visual indicators. And also, for example, I would use like a warning sign sticker for a feature that is not working in the current beta. And I know just by looking at that sticker that it's something that I got to revisit later in the summer, whether it was fixed or not by Apple. And also stickers are how I visually indicate each chapter. So that's just like a visual thing to make the map prettier, but they also have a functional purpose to me, especially the warning sign stuff.
This episode of App Stories is brought to you by Linode. Whether you're working on a personal project or managing your enterprise's infrastructure, Linode has the pricing, support, and scale that you need to take your project to the next level. They have 11 data centers spread throughout the world, including their newest one in Sydney, Australia. And with their enterprise-grade hardware, an S3 compatible storage option, and their next-generation network, Linode delivers the performance you expect at a surprisingly good price. Get started on Linode today with a $20 credit for listeners of this show, and you'll get access to dedicated CPU plans with physical cores reserved just for you, GPU compute plans suitable for AI, machine learning, and video processing, block storage and object storage that can scale to your storage requirements, one-click installations of the most popular apps including WordPress, LampStack, and game servers for Minecraft, and a whole lot more. Just go to linode.com/appstories and use the promo code appstories2020 when creating a new Linode account, and you'll get a $20 credit toward your next project. Oh, and you know what? Linode is also hiring. So if you're interested in that, go check out linode.com/careers to find out more. Once again, that URL is linode.com/appstories and the promo code appstories2020 for that $20 credit. Our thanks to Linode for their support of the show. Let's move on for a second to PDFs, because I know that you do some PDF research. My sense is it's not a lot, but every now and then there's something in a PDF and you have to deal with it, right?
Yeah, every now and then I have these couple of PDF documents with more details on iOS and iPadOS that I need to highlight and extract somehow and bring them into my my note-taking app or MindNote. And I've found that I really like using Margin Note for this. So Margin Note is a PDF annotation tool that it's got this unique feature that I haven't seen anywhere else. Honestly, it lets you, so like other PDF viewers, it lets you highlight passages of text, right, in a PDF document. Later, you can turn all of your highlights into a mind map inside Margin Note. So all of your highlights, if you enable the special mind map mode, you will see all of your highlights turn into like an actual map. And from there, I can take the entire map and copy it as like an OPML file, for example, paste it into MindNode, and then in MindNode, it becomes very easy to take all those highlights, paste them into my main iOS review map, and assign them to the relevant sections. So it's just an easier way for me to take all of these highlights, convert them to a format that is already compatible with my mind map, and from there I just need to use drag and drop and assign them to the sections that I already have in the map.
I know you've been looking at some other apps, PDF apps. What have you been looking at?
So I mentioned this on Connected very quickly last week. I am considering. Well, I found that I don't like how I deal with the Apple developer documentation pages on the web.
Okay.
I would prefer, because right now I just open Safari and I just go to the web page in Safari and I, select text and manually bring it into my notes or my map.
Right.
But what I would like to do is have an offline copy of those. And I just have many thoughts at the moment about whether, do I want to save these web pages as PDF documents, or do I want to save them as web archives, which is a different format that is also offline. And a web archive is basically an offline replica of a full HTML page alongside CSS and any other additional resources of the page. So it looks exactly like the page in Safari, but it's offline. It's an archive. But web archives, you can preview them with Quick Look. You can use them in Keepit. You can use them in DevonThink. But web archives you cannot highlight something on a web archive, right? It's not like a PDF. It's an actual web page. And, you cannot highlight web pages unless you convert them to something else. But a web archive is just a simple copy of it. So I have many thoughts in the sense that, first of all, do I want to save them as PDF documents, which I can highlight with a bunch of apps? Or do I want to save them as web archives, which are more, when you save a web archive, it looks exactly like the page, and it even preserves like links and other visual elements.
Right, because PDFs a lot of times don't look great.
A lot of times don't look great, and a lot of times don't have clickable links, right?
Right.
But web archives I cannot highlight. I cannot apply annotations to them. However, web archives, I can search with DevonThink. And DevonThink has some amazing search features, especially when you get into the advanced search stuff with the search operators. So I don't know. This is one of the things that I'm considering how to improve for this year's process. And I'll probably spend, maybe this weekend, maybe next weekend, just taking a look at all these options. I'm taking a look at apps like, as I mentioned, DevonThink, Highlights, which I believe you reviewed recently on Mac Stories, John.
I did. I did. I also think you ought to look at Flexel, which I ran across recently, which it's a
Flexol.
little bit, yeah, Flexel is kind of a combination of highlights and good notes almost, because it allows you to take handwritten notes as well as, highlighting on a PDF. I haven't used it extensively, so I'm not going to tell you that it's the solution to your issue, but it is worth taking a look at. I almost think that you should probably save both a web archive and a PDF, and maybe they can be stored together. I don't know. I mean, I know that adds a layer of complexity, but it would allow you to both easily highlight things and be able to pull text and follow links and things. If you're in the web archive.
Yeah, I don't know. It's something that I have all these options right this year. I want to think about it and I want to find a system that works well for me. All right. So the writing process. So this is where the whole thing is very geeky and custom designed for me, I think. But I still feel like there's some tips that maybe people can take from this and apply to their own workflows. So obviously, writing these reviews, and we're talking here about stories that have sometimes reached like 70,000 words, right?
Right.
So big, long form, big scale projects. Now it's important for me it was important for me to find a system that would scale, right, to
Yep.
accommodate these kinds of projects, but also support ways for me to break it down in smaller chunks and work on them as smaller sections one at a time.
Right.
So the app that I use to write and edit the review, and the writing and editing workflows are basically the same. That they all happen in the same app. The app is IA Writer. So I've been using IA Writer as my solution for writing the review for the past couple of years, and I've fully customized the entire setup to my needs. So what I do every year is I use IA Writer with iCloud Drive. And I have, of course, multiple shortcuts that create and save multiple copies of the review in Dropbox, in the iPad's local storage, and in iCloud Drive in other locations. So I always have multiple copies of the review, but but of course, the main location where I work is IA Writer in iCloud Drive. I create a separate folder every year for the review in IA Writer's root directory. And in that folder, so let's say this year is going to be called iOS 14 Review. In that folder, I create two subfolders, one called Assets and the other called Uploaded Images. And in the root directory is where I store text files, markdown text files. Now, once I have a structure for the review, I create separate files for each chapter of the review. So introduction is a separate file. Last year, design was chapter 3, and that was a separate file, and so forth. So every chapter is its own file. Every file begins with a number, followed by the title of the chapter. So, for example, 1, introduction, 2, setup, 3, design, 4, files, and so forth.
Right.
I do this because I need the numbers to sort the chapters alphabetically.
Mm-hmm.
That allows me to just in the sidebar of IA Writer to see a list of the chapters as they would appear in alphabetical order. But then what I do is this entire setup basically revolves around a single feature of IA Writer called content blocks. So content blocks, there will be a link in the show notes where you can read more about them on the IA Writer website. Content blocks are a feature of IA Writer that allow you to embed content from a separate file in the app's document library into the current file.
Right.
Basically, you enter a slash, you enter the file name of the file that you want to embed, and when you preview the document, the contents of that file will be extracted from it and embedded within the preview. So what I do is I create a note I create a separate file called 0 table of contents. And in that file, I enter all these references to all the chapters of the review on separate lines. So, for example, /1 introduction.md, the MD is the syntax of the markdown format. On a separate line, I do /2 setup and performance.md. Those are content block references. When I hit Command R to preview the document in the table of contents in IA Writer, all those content blocks are expanded, and what I see is the full review, right? And when I dismiss the preview, it looks like a pretty short document, right? It's a single page file with like 10 links, but when you preview it, it becomes a story of 70,000 words. And that's because it expands all the content blocks and takes all the text from all the chapters that I referenced as content blocks. And this is ideal for me because it allows me to have separate files for each chapter, but also an easy way to compile them all together, right? And preview them exactly as they would look on the website. And speaking of previewing them, to make this easier and better for me, I also commissioned a couple of years ago these custom themes that replicated the exact look and custom layout of my iOS review design as it will look on Mac Stories, but inside IA Writer, because IA Writer also has a syntax for custom templates. And so I can now preview the review locally inside IA Writer exactly as it would appear on Mac Stories, including the custom table of contents grid that we have as a floating window that appears. I can have that inside IA Writer with my custom preview template.
That is a really great preview. I mean, we use that all year round, and I guess you had it commissioned particularly for the review, but I find it handy every single day that we're writing on the site.
What I also do is, thanks to content blocks, I can also generate different versions of the review because I can mix and match text with content blocks and generate slightly different outputs. So, for example, I can generate a version of the review that has all the necessary formatting for the ebook version that we do for Club Mac Stories members. But I can also do a version of the review for Ryan, for example, that excludes all of this custom formatting. And I can do a version of the review for the website, right?
Right.
I also use content blocks to embed screenshots in the review without uploading them to CDN first.
Yeah, that's really interesting to me because I think that's like the kind of feature that most people don't know that IA Writer can do.
All right. So IA Writer, thanks to content blocks, in addition to referencing text files, it can also reference any kind of file. Like you can embed a CSV table as a content block reference, for example, or you can embed a local image attachment via content block reference. And when you preview the document, the image will be shown to you as an actual native image in the text. So what I do is I created this system 2 years ago that is based on shortcuts and scriptable to allow me to save screenshots as local images in iCloud Drive, place them. So I mentioned that assets folder that I have as a subfolder in my iOS review directory. So what I can do is, while I'm editing the review and I want to take a screenshot and save it quickly and save it inside the review, but without having to wait for the upload process, what I do is I take a screenshot. I have a shortcut pinned as a custom icon in my dock. I tap that shortcut. It takes the last screenshots that I took and passes it to Scriptable. Scriptable is the JavaScript automation app.
Right.
In Scriptable, I have this custom script, again, that I shared in that issue of Mac Stories Weekly, that takes that image and, thanks to files bookmarks, saves that image into the assets folder of IA Writer. So Scriptable can poke a hole in the sandbox, in the iOS sandbox, and save that image in a specific subfolder of IA Writer inside iCloud Drive. And when it does that, it lets me rename the file, and it automatically tags the image with with the tags that I use in iCloud Drive. And then at the end, it puts the content block syntax in my system clipboard. So in 15 seconds, I can go from a screenshot to a content block reference that is pasted in the clipboard. And so in IA Writer, I can just hit Command V, and a content block reference is inserted in the body text. And when I preview the story, that reference becomes an image.
Yeah, that's really nice. And then later on, you can upload it, right?
Later, there's also a second part of this. So later, when I'm at the end of the editing process, right? By editing process, I mean I read and Ryan reads the review multiple times, like at least 5 read-throughs every year. So when I'm in the final read-through, those images, those local images, of course, if I use that syntax on the web, you wouldn't see any image because that's a local reference. It's an image on the local file system.
It's basically a file path.
It's a file path, basically. That file path needs to become an actual URL to an image available on the web. So I have a second script that allows me to select the file path, copy it to the clipboard, and on the side, I can keep scriptable in slide over. And I have the script that I can run. It takes the file path that I just copied. And what it can do is, basically the script says, okay, this is the file path. It means that, again, thanks to file bookmarks, I can go to this subfolder of IA Writer, look for this file name, take it as an image file, upload it to the CDN, untag the file in iCloud Drive, apply the done tag that I have. It's a green tag that means this file is it's done. You no longer need it.
Right.
Move the original image to the other subfolder that I have, the uploaded images subfolder, and finally paste the actual link to the image to the system clipboard, so that in IA Writer, I had the file path selected, right?
Right.
I can just paste the link returned by Scriptable, and it will override the file path and insert the image as an actual markdown image syntax reference.
Wow,
so
that's really clever. Yeah.
Yeah, and thanks to my to my fiber connection, uploading images, it just takes me like 20 seconds. So in 20 seconds, and in the meantime, I'm still reading, right? I can still do other things. So basically, as I scroll the review and I read, when I find the link, I let Scriptable do this on the side. I don't have to pay attention to this. And as I'm reading, I can convert all of these file paths to actual URLs. And this allows me, John, I can tell you that last year, in a single afternoon, I was able to upload something like 300 local image references and turn them into URLs in like 3 hours. So much better.
Yeah, that's a huge time savings, because I know, just having done the Mac OS review last year, which was significantly shorter than yours. I think it was like 30,000 words or something. Doing the screenshots for that was like a day and a half of work by itself, and I'm sure I would be able to do it a lot faster if I switched to this method this year.
Yeah, I recommend it. And I will, especially now that shortcuts can pass images to Scriptable as native parameters, it's become so much faster. It's taken me several minutes to describe this on a podcast. In practice, This runs in like 15 seconds. And it's that kind of automation that took me a while to set it up. But now that it's done, I no longer have to touch it. It just works, and it saves me so much time. Like I remember I used to upload images manually one by one years ago. It was a nightmare. It just took me a week to upload images. And now not only do I save time when uploading images, but also during the editing process, I already have images in front of me because they are local file paths. And again, this highlights why IA Writer is such a powerful text editor that has support for file bookmarks and content blocks and local image attachments. It is why I cannot use alternatives like Ulysses, for example, or like Drafts, because these apps do not integrate with file bookmarks, do not integrate with iCloud Drive in this way, and do not have a feature like content blocks that allows me to still retain a visual preview, right? Because in the editing process, I still can get a sense of the flow of the story, right? How many paragraphs do I have before the next screenshot, right? Because I don't want to have like a wall of text for
Right.
readers, So I
Yeah.
can still have that visual sense of how the review is going to flow on the website. And I have a custom preview that has a custom Mac Stories theme. Again, something that I cannot do in other text editors. And later, I can convert all of these local file paths to actual images using a script in a JavaScript app that also uses file bookmarks and can process files in another subfolder on the system. It's just incredible, the integration that you have with multiple apps, that the developers of these apps had no idea that these integrations would be possible with each other, right? But because of a native system API, such as file bookmarks, you can make all this happen yourself. Because thanks to that technology, multiple apps can talk to each other.
Yeah, I think that's really an interesting point too, because especially the ability for you while you're working on such a large project to visualize exactly how it's going to look on the site, how it's broken up by the images, what the flow is, those are all important aspects of it. And because I know, having done longer projects too, if I just leave myself notes like screenshot of X here, that kind of thing, it's fine, but it gets messy fast and it doesn't give you a real sense for what you're creating.
Yeah, exactly. And the last thing I want to mention is that iWriter also has support for leaving tasks inside the body text of a story. A task is basically like a hyphen followed by 2 square brackets, and then you can add some text. And if you use that syntax, you can leave essentially a note for yourself. And in the next version of the app, it becomes easier to see how many tasks you've left in the body text of a story. Because they are changing the way that stats are displayed in the text editor. So right now, in the version of the app that I have that is coming out soon, I think, I can see both my word count and open tasks at the same time. And that's super nice because I can see, oh, okay, I left 10 tasks for myself. And usually when I leave a task in the body text, that means that I need to upload an image. So even before pasting the content blocks and the local file paths, I can leave a note for myself and say, look, here, when you will be taking a screenshot in the next couple of weeks, here you're supposed to put a screenshot of, I don't know, your home screen or whatever. So even the task syntax before the actual process of taking screenshots takes place, that's still useful to me.
Yeah, that's really amazing. Is there anything else that you're going to test out this year that you haven't mentioned?
I think I will be switching, of course. Last year, I was using reminders to keep track of tasks for the review in my task manager. But now I'm using OmniFocus. So I'm sure I will be coming up with a pretty complex system in OmniFocus that takes advantage of perspectives.
Sure.
Custom perspectives in
Yeah, that makes
OmniFocus Pro.
sense.
I really wanna create something that helps me get a sense of what are my immediate tasks and what are the big picture tasks for the review. And that's all possible thanks to OmniFocus perspectives, because I can use a combination of tags and due dates and start dates, all that kind of stuff. I want to put together some custom perspectives that can help me. Here's something like, here's a perspective that shows you all the features that are buggy and that you're supposed to double check again in a month. Stuff like that. It's totally possible with OmniFocus.
Oh, that's really cool. Wow. I'm definitely going to go back to that issue.
I could keep talking for at least another couple of hours about
I know,
stuff.
I know you could. And it's amazing because you've taken such a long time to get here, but that's because it's been a refining process over the years. And a lot of this is only possible now because of the system integrations. I mean, 3 years ago, there's no way you would have been doing anything close to what this setup is. So
no, between multiple windows and shortcuts with parameters and files, none of this would have been possible.
Right. All right, Federico. Well, it's an exciting time of year. I'm actually getting excited for WWDC. It's going to be a shame that we won't see everybody we know, but at the same time, it's going to be a lot of fun digging into this stuff over the summer.
Yeah, for sure.
I want to thank our sponsor again for this episode. That's Linode. And of course, you can find me and Federico over at macstories.net. Federico is on Instagram and Twitter. He's at Viticci. That's VITICCI. And I'm at John Voorhees. JOHNVOORHWS. Talk to you next week, Federico.
Ciao, John.